Grand Concourse of Learning. Betrayance Hall. Local time 1645 hours. Emma. I really couldn't blame Quiv nor Vanavan for this dual-pronged ambush. If anything, I would have done the same if I was in their shoes. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that this was one of the few times I could objectively see myself as the villain in their stories. Because as much as I could attempt to justify it, this victory and comeback was definitely the furthest away you could get from academic integrity. A fact that bore little on my conscience as a mission commander, scouting operative and forward diplomat, but one that definitely made me feel a bit antsy as a student. Task complete. Speech-to-text dictation in High Nexian from subject Professor Vanavan. VIs weren't explicitly forbidden from academia. However, their role was always to act as an aid rather than a full-blown replacement to the whole academic process. Having your essay completely generated by a VI sort of defeated the purpose of actually writing it in the first place at all. The so-called academic integrity crisis of the mid-21st, early 22nd, and early 23rd centuries was enough to hammer home that message. And it was from those crises that the contemporary relationship between VI and student was formed, and more or less drilled into our conscience from day one of primary school. Though it was important to note that those reforms weren't one-sided. The fact that there were two whole repeats of the crisis, following the first student-centric reforms, demonstrated that both parties, institutions included, needed change, if only to finally adapt with the times. It was a messy process. But such was the case with much of early intrasolar contemporary history. With all that being said, though, I could rationalize the iffiness of the whole blackboard incident easily enough. I had delegated homework away, after all. So the whole blackboard debacle could be reasoned away as an extension of that, and perhaps a show of cultural respect on the part of the diplomat in me too. Finally, the Academy had shown itself to not be very forthcoming on the whole fairness thing on their end. So why should I play by the rules they so clearly ignored? Good faith, I thought to myself. Though once again that was the optimist and idealist in me talking. An aspect of myself that even the PSYOP instructors back home told me not to lose, but merely to circumvent whenever advantageous. There's a time and a place for everything. Sometimes you need to adapt, but adaptation doesn't mean completely abandoning your principles. Affirmative. Give me my hands back, Evie. Acknowledged. My hands, thankfully, weren't actually forced to go through the insane gymnastics that were required of rapid-fire Nexian calligraphy. I probably would have sprained something if it was actually inside the confines of the suit's multi-model manual manipulators, the M4 or Exodex for short. Thankfully, given the suit's size, my hands were instead safely tucked just above them in the suit's wrist compartment. But while my hands and conscience were both unharmed, I didn't really have a plan for the social game I'd inadvertently just won, following the whole blackboard debacle. Especially as Vanavan turned to me with that dreaded smile. 50 points to Cadet Emma Booker's peer group! And the points game I desperately wanted to avoid. Though, thankfully... Toot toot toot! I wouldn't need to entertain the classroom social games any further, as the end-of-period marching band came in at the nick of time, saving me from the much-dreaded flurry of questions that was sure to follow Quiv's little gambit. So with a quick nod towards Vanavan and a few fast stomps up the lecture hall stairs, I was once again off with the gang in tow, our points now putting us as the 7th group to leave. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Living Room, Local time 1700 hours. Emma. All eyes were once again on me. Though thankfully the topic at hand was one that had already been addressed, several weeks ago by the library in fact. "The exact verbiage used by the library eludes me," Thalman began, prompting Thacia to quickly chime in. "A living, breathing, dynamic system of mathematics is what the owl observed," she spoke, crossing her arms regally in the process. "I would say I am surprised this applies not only to speech, but to the written word as well," Eleanor continued, pinching the bridge of his snout in the process. "However, at this point, surprise tends to be a foregone conclusion in matters pertaining to you and your Earthrealm tricks." However, unlike the dressing down I received during last week's point-occurring incidents, Thalman instead led the charge with an ear-to-ear grin as he smacked my back hard. "Now that's the spirit, Emma," he began, cackling hard as he continued to shake my shoulder to and fro. "If the Nexus wishes to issue impossible tasks to New Realmers, then so be it. Wield their precious high Nexian in ways that they can only hope to mimic only a fraction of. Or better yet, surpass them at their own game. Flip the tables, not just by meeting their impossible demands, but also humiliate them at their own altar." The Lupanor took a moment to compose himself, before continuing on with a few rapid-fire words of affirmation. "You've made the spirits of New Realm candidates from ages long past very happy today, Emma." I could practically feel the zeal of satisfaction emanating from the wolf. Moreover, I could actually get where he was coming from. "You know what makes this better, Thalman?" I shot back, eliciting a cock of the Lupanor's head. "The fact that all of this is being done without an ounce of effort on my end, for a malicious artifice feeding off of their language, and regurgitating it back to them with rules I don't even need to touch." Despite the faceplate in the way, I felt that we actually connected for a moment there, with two grins being exchanged, and a solid warrior's handshake following soon after, pulling each other's chests together in a solid thump of brotherly camaraderie. Our back and forth continued on for a solid few more minutes, with much Nexian dissing being thrown left and right, much to Eleanor's chagrin and Thacia's aloofness. The conversation continued for so long that the Eevee had to finally step in, revealing the rest of the tasks we had remaining. With one more tired laugh from my end, I eventually turned to the now snacking Eleanor and homework-busy Thacia. "Right, so I'm planning on just approaching Lariel this evening after dinner. Does that sound good?" "Anything is acceptable so long as we swiftly conclude the library's incessant treasure hunt," Eleanor grumbled. "My fate is not worth a measly green book." "Understood. Operation Talk to Lariel is a go then. Well, since I have 45 minutes before dinner starts, I think I'm gonna head out to stretch my legs a bit," I announced, getting up from the couch and heading first thing towards the door. "May I ask where you're going, Emma?" Thacia finally chimed in, her eyes narrowing, locking onto my lenses. "Oh, I'm just visiting a certain someone who I think needs the company," I began cryptically. "Speaking of which, I don't suppose you happen to have, like, novels and stuff lying around that I could borrow?" Healing Wing, Reeler's Room. Local time 17:30 hours. Emma. To say I felt conflicted about coming here would be an understatement. Part of me felt like I was a walking disaster magnet, which made me doubt if even involving myself with Reeler was the best way forward. But despite the self-doubt and the plethora of reasons why I shouldn't involve myself anymore, I felt like I at least owed it to her to make her life just a little bit better. After all, she wouldn't even be in this awkward position if it wasn't for my meddling. I knew I had to make it right by her. So here I was, entering the same room as on that hectic house-choosing ceremony day. Except this time, I didn't come empty-handed. I had books, food, and a whole host of treats in store, courtesy of my student privileges. Privileges which I intended on showering Reeler with. "Hiya," I began, setting just about everything on one of the overly ornate side tables with a thunderous thud. "How are you holding up?" This, coupled with my sudden and abrupt arrival, seemed enough to startle Reeler out of her daydream stupor. the red-haired elf's eyes growing wide at my arrival, her mouth hanging agape, probably too stunned to speak. Sorry, I thought you were already awake, I apologized awkwardly.
It's nothing to apologize for, Cadet Emma Booker.
Hey, didn't I tell you to drop that? I countered insistently, as I began pouring out both tea and some mystery fizzy water, as well as grabbing all of the sweet treats I'd requisitioned from Eleanor moments earlier.
Ah, yes, just Emma,
Rila replied with a nod, her eyes growing wide at the veritable feast coming her way.
Are those...
Yup, I got these on recommendation from a certain noble foodie. Or, shall I say, I kinda took the liberty of just grabbing them from under his nose. I cut the former apprentice off cheekily, garnering a look of grave concern that was only rivaled by the sheer dread on her face on the night of the warehouse explosion. If you're worried about me being reprimanded, then don't be. Let's just say I have him on a tight leash. I preemptively addressed Rila's concerns with a wink, and translating this to a cock of my head and some wild hand gestures. This seemed to do little to calm the former trade apprentice's nerves, however, which prompted me to simply set the breakfast in bed tray in front of her, following it up with some more words of encouragement. Seriously, don't worry about it, Rila. I'm starting to gain a grip on things here, and the noble in question is just a friend from my peer group, so don't sweat it. Besides, considering everything that's happened, I, for one, am willing to go above and beyond to make your stay here as comfortable as...
Well, why?
She muttered out, cutting me off just as I was about to finish.
Why what? Why are you being so accommodating?
Well, for starters, you're one of the few people I've actually started a pretty decent rapport with here, and I was hoping we could be friends, or at least acquaintances. Either way, human hospitality goes a long way with people we find to be amenable. I paused before pulling in closer, cupping a hand next to where my mouth should have been. Trust me on this one, we can go to huge lengths to shower the people we like with stuff that we hope they like. I spoke cheerily, before going down the inevitable pipeline to the more somber answer. And secondly, it was kind of my fault that you were wrapped up in this whole mess, I sighed, gripping my forehead in the process. I can't say I was a fan of the life you were leading, but my personal reservations aside, I kind of derailed your own path in life in the worst and most unintentional way possible, which is totally unacceptable. Not to mention by getting involved, I became the inadvertent cause of your injuries. I gestured to the bed and the room around us. So being accommodating is really the least I can do to repay you for my blunders, Rila. A small pause punctuated that explanation. One in which Rila took a moment to turn inwards, before turning back to me with an expression of even greater befuddlement.
You speak as if you owe me a life debt, Emma, she began, her brows furrowed in confusion, when it is I who should be the party beholden to such reciprocities, she offered, taking longer to form those words than I would have assumed. That answer definitely took me by surprise. The whole dynamic I'd formed in my head, and the way I'd framed this whole situation, was now refusing to compute with what Rila had just laid out. But it was my meddling that caused... We were both at the whims of the greater game that day, Rila interjected, finally garnering the energy to speak up. It was Lord Lartier who wished to take us down a path of uncertain fates. It was likewise the other noble present who chose to ignore your warnings. Even disregarding your attempts to physically alter the predetermined course of events, you chose to shield me from the worst of it. Rila spoke earnestly, her eyes moving up to meet my lenses. Or have you forgotten that fact? I moved to speak, but it was my turn to be unable to formulate a proper response. I guess I just thought that saving you was like the least I could do to make up for... There was nothing to make up for, Emma, Rila countered bluntly, which prompted me to nod and sigh in response. I see. A small pause once again punctuated that exchange, before a smile once more found itself on my visage. Well, regardless, that doesn't change the fact that I'm going to be as accommodating as I can be. That is, of course, if you're all right with it. But why? Why?
There's a reason why I didn't lead with the guilt or reciprocity thing, Reela. It's because I genuinely just want to be nice, without any of the associated baggage Nexians would typically attach to it, I offered with a shrug, prompting a slow blink of the elf's eyes. I don't think that this is totally unheard of, right? Like, it can't all be cutthroat all the time now, can it?
It isn't, Emma, Reela acknowledged. But such altruism, or at least altruism without strings, is only seen amongst those with nothing to gain and nothing to lose.
The elf took another moment to ponder her own words, before coming to some internal conclusion, which finally elicited a smile.
But I suppose such is to be expected from an impossible realm of earned respect.
The elf took another moment to ponder things, before finally continuing the conversation with a heavy sigh.
Part of me refuses to believe your claims of that impossible realm. Even though I have been nothing short of enamored by the concept following our first fateful exchange on that night. Everything in this world points to your words being empty and vapid. Yet everything I've seen of you, and the actions you purvey, points to the truth being completely contrary to what should be expected.
She began rambling, pinching the bridge of her nose in the process.
It is a lot to ponder, but ultimately, perhaps against my better judgment, I will be more than happy to continue entertaining this impossibility.
A larger smile slowly formed across the elf's face, as she began taking a bite out of one of Eleanor's danishes. Her features practically lit up shortly thereafter.
A world where commoners dare to stand toe-to-toe with highborns is one I most certainly wish to hear more about.
Reela practically beamed out. The next few minutes marched on with far less friction, as the path of conversation was greased both with goodwill and good food in equal measures. However, just when it came time to leave, a topic which I'd initially shunted to the back of my mind quickly emerged.
There is another matter I like to quickly touch on, Emma, brief as it is.
Yeah?
In the minutes following that explosion, there was an amethyst dragon that emerged from the depths, correct?
Yeah, that's right. What about it?
I am not sure if this was a dream or a hallucination induced by my injuries, but did it fixate its attention on us following its escape?
I quickly turned to the Eevee, grabbing the footage of that night as those gemstone-like eyes unmistakably locked onto my lenses. On me in particular, but yeah, I guess that's close enough, I answered confidently. Why'd you ask? Reela's features darkened for a moment, her gaze veering off out and towards the balcony, before turning back towards me with a wary expression.
And it actually looked at you, as in not a mere passing glance?
Would solid 5 seconds of staring fit the description? I merely responded, prompting a look of genuine concern to form on Reela's features. Is that like a bad thing, or...
It could mean a great many things, Emma.
Oh?
Some of which are good, but most, not so much.
Oh.
Though I cannot for the life of me imagine why it would be fixated on beings so outside of its immediate concern, the elf continued. I am by no means an expert on dragons, but from my limited understanding, dragons never interact with individuals without good reason. This is why they exclusively interact with highborns, those that have the power to influence the destiny of kingdoms and the fates of continents. Even so, these interactions are often mostly bestial. Why? Why would it be fixated on you of all people, Emma?
Well, I guess I'll have my answer soon enough. North Riffian Forests, Outlands, Nexus, local time 1755. Sim the Honeydew.
Ugh. Ugh. Giant mushrooms, I spoke for a heavy snot-filled sneeze. I swear, their spores are the work of the old heathen gods. Sometimes I wish His Eternal Majesty would have finished the job by utterly annihilating these forests.
His Eternal Majesty's earned his rest, boss.
The winged Thulvan replied with a chuckle.
Besides, with the rate the realm's expanding, I doubt even His Eternal Majesty's got the fire to burn down all that new growth, let alone these established forests.
The bard chuckled, moving to grab his loot in the process, but not before we turned the corner to find a grisly sight. A mangled party of men-at-arms, their carriages and their conveyances both artificed and formerly living. At which point did everyone move to grab their weapons.
I think I'm going to be sick,
Kintor spoke under a squeaky breath, holding her daggers at the ready.
Oh, well, I think we found our trail, boss,
Durham Morven announced bluntly, moving forward to nudge one of the mangled corpses with the blunt end of his battle axe. Though this wasn't done to satisfy morbid curiosity, no. Because after a few seconds of digging around the mass of flesh, was the bear able to uncover what it was I'd hoped to find. A capsa, completely unmarred and untainted by the viscera that was formerly its holder. I had little hesitation in grabbing the gem-encrusted cylinder, as due to some latent enchantment it seemed completely impervious to the dirtying of the grime and viscera surrounding it. I moved to flick its lid open, generating a satisfying pop, revealing a rolled-up scroll nestled neatly within it. Official warrant from the Crown and the Privy Council, authorizing an official dragon recapture for those holding royal warrants. Yada, yada, yada. Yep, this is it. That dragon can't be too far now. This revelation, instead of bringing about a sense of relief from everyone present, instead shook all to their core. But it was none other than Thorvan who seemed more shaken than others, as he came forward with shaky wings, grabbing me by my pauldrons.
Boss, I hate to say this, but I think we're in over our heads. This isn't worth risking life or limb over. The coin ain't worth it. Come on, you said it yourself before, right? Don't let gold cloud your better judgment. Let's leave while we can, pay the damn cancellation fine, and avoid being mauled by this dragon that's so clearly...
Thorvan! I shot out firmly. Get a hold of yourself. There's a clear difference between these poor sods and our lot. Read the scroll. I shoved the scroll into the man's hands, as he began reading through it line by line. Their goal is to recapture the damn thing. Our goal is to merely observe and report.
Exactly,
Kintor acknowledged, putting on a confident smile.
And if there's one thing we're good at, it's running away.
And running away is practically the latter half of our assignment,
Duran reaffirmed with a solid nod. With the voices of the party in near unanimity, we pressed onward. I dearly hope you know what you're getting yourself into, Blue Knight, I thought to myself silently. Student Lounge, the Transgression Academy for the Magical Arts. Local time 1755. Ping. For someone who had declared their self-admitted disinterest in the path to class sovereign, Cadet Emma Booker had most certainly made waves as a result of her latest stunt. And while a slap to Quiz's face was always appreciated, what I did not appreciate was the latent message her actions had subtly communicated. New Roma savage. Primitive. Backwards. Those were the words I'd used on that first eventful week, and they were words that could now be put under scrutiny. For what manner of person could be considered primitive if they so perfectly replicated Hynexian high script? Would that not be an insult to the learned scribes and scholar nobles who had otherwise dedicated their lives to the pursuit of civility? Is writing and penmanship not the foundation which underpins civilized society? Then again, could one truly claim that the Arlinian crab was in any way actually sapient? My fellows, please allow me to explain away the theatrics of this morning's class, I began, grinning all the while. There exists in my realm a creature known as the Arlinian crab, a creature with neither a thinking mind nor reaching hands, but a creature which possesses the ability to perfectly mimic all patterns it sees. I moved to demonstrate, revealing several images of this very phenomenon, sightseers of these sea beasts which, through great dedication, managed to mimic both signage and script of any nearby signs they saw.
with each and every letter drawn out in the sand to an incredibly accurate degree. As you can see, the new Roma could merely be utilizing a latent animalistic aspect of their inherent biological potential. In an act similar to her feats during physical education, we see her practicing not the intent of the civilized person, but instead utilizing the uncivilized functions of her innate animal. Oh? Do we now? An insufferable voice broke through the sea of students, as they parted left and right, allowing the ever-annoying Venerian to come through. Lord Eleanor Valaria, I huffed out. To what do I owe the pleasure? I raise a point of contention, Lord Ping, he countered, prompting me to acquiesce with a glare and a shrug. Proceed. Exactly how much time does this silly little crustacean take to mimic but a few letters of Hynexian? He began, with his signature vexatiously pitched breath. I know not, for I care not to delve into the workings of what is relegated to those stuffy scholars who— Days, Lord Ping! Days, I say! He continued, practically screeching out this revelation, slamming open a book in the process. As is written by Scholar Lorenz, the Aurelian crab performs such elaborate mimicry for the sake of courtship, taking hours, if not days, to replicate a single line of high script. Now, I know not what your perspective of time is like, but I can most certainly say that Cadet Emma Booker's rapid-paced writing most certainly did not take days now, did it? A series of restrained chuckles arrived in favor of the Venerian's words, though many more derisive murmurs came from my most ardent supporters. Lord Ping was merely making a rough analogy, Lord Valaria, a voice from the crowd shouted.
Yes, yes! There are assuredly more animals similar to the Aurelian crab, but this creature is merely the most readily known example of such a phenomenon.
Another voice came through. This eventually devolved into an all-out verbal scuffle, one that, disappointingly, was prematurely halted by the call to dinner. The Grand Dining Hall. Local time 1940 hours. Emma. I ignored most of the murmurs and whispers of the writing incident for much of dinner. If anything, I spent most of the time catching up on the weekly report, and of course on the MRED experiments, which continued to taunt me with its glacial progress. Conversations with the gang were surprisingly minimal, as it was clear that everyone was simply waiting to get back to the dorms. Though the same couldn't be said for me, as my eyes were locked on the prize that was frustratingly out of reach. As Maltoria's seat, now Lariel's, was empty for the entirety of dinner. I'd hoped for some last-minute miracle. However, none came, because as dinner came to a close, so too did the faculty leave without any fuss. And for some reason, they were really booking it today. This prompted me to march towards the nearest apprentice who hadn't yet followed suit. Though I immediately regretted that decision the moment I realized who I'd approached. Apprentice Lariel, now, was it? Apprentice Ral Altari. Oh, God. Apprentice Lariel, now, was it? Apprentice Ral Altaria del Naya Se Anti Sonzia II enunciated in his typical theatrical fashion. Yes, I'm wondering where she is currently busy. Last I heard, she had attributed her absence to some inexplicable personal quest. Right. Could you at least tell me where her office is, so that I can maybe leave her a letter, or— No! You may not, he interjected, though I can say that she will be back sometime soon. Can you at least give me a time and date, or— No! I breathed in deeply, nodding in acquiescence, taking this one failure of today's events with some level of grace. Though the same couldn't be said for Eleanor the moment we arrived back at the dorms.
Dragon's Heart Tower. Level 23. Residence 30. Living room. Local time 2020 hours. Emma.
Eleanor, now, I need you to relax, I began, as the dark blue Venerian slowly but surely started to flare with smoke.
Relax! Relax!
Eleanor mimicked, with no attempt to hide his agitation. The preamble made in an attempt to calm him down, resulting in quite literally the opposite.
I'm sure Emma can clarify why the situation isn't as grave as you might be led to believe, Eleanor, Thamin reasoned.
Exactly. We still have time to deal with both the library and Lariel. Remember, she did say that all she might need to submit is a copy. However, even if she needs to submit primary evidence, we still have until the end of the week to get the Green Book, I offered, as both Thacia and Thamin stared warily at the seemingly unstoppable chain reaction taking place within the Venerian, his cheeks now puffing up to the point where they were practically red. This isn't like the Dragon Quest, where I'm seriously on a bit of a time crunch.
This is unacceptable!
The Venerian screamed.